trying to think of something that would be animated. Hello, Art with Luke. And Hop Lily, Lum, Feifei, Lily Fum, Lily Lum. You dreamt of my art? That's interesting. Hope it was a good dream. If not, my apologies. Anyway, what I was gonna say is that I wanted to do something that has a little bit more variation, but still a decent amount of repetition in style. Where I have something I can return to. People have some sort of investment and sense of connection to some elements of it. Is that thrown out like a big bit? It's not a huge bit rate. It should be okay. Alright, it's not as jerky. But doing something that had some sort of sense of relationship for people, that they can point to something and enjoy and appreciate it. And what I want to try and do is have animations of, hello Salahi, animations of the alphabet. Just having sort of the face loop guys creating letters, which means that I can come back and every day have an idea of what I'm going to do. They don't have to be particularly long loops, and I can play a little bit with associations that people might have with the letters. So, and then I can also stitch them together, or people could potentially stitch them together for their own thing, where conceivably each one starts in the same spot, and then I can have sort of this guy going. And have elements of the 3D stuff and create an A, something like that. And it has a face going the length of it. And then this would be black on this side. And then twist back around. And you got your face going all the way around. Something like that. But just have this animation. Then have this guy go up, curve around, and then land here. And then maybe it squashes down as a wide face. And then thins back out. Twists back, or rotates back around. Sorry, there's a bug. And then lands back over here, and you start over again. I'll get a little bit tighter on this. So that's the plan, and it means that I can follow this sort of form, keep it going, and it loops through, and then conceivably you have the same thing happen with this guy, that sort of deal. And you have B, then C is easier. It would have to sort of be like a pop-up and then back down sort of guy. But just go through the alphabet, and it's a pretty easy thing. It's repetitious with some variation. I don't have to think as much about what I'm starting to do each day. And yeah, so that's the plan for the next few weeks, tentatively. If it doesn't go through, or it's moving too fast or too slow, then I might vary it a bit, but getting through the alphabet. And then I've got that as a full body of something that I can come back to. So first things first, I need to figure out general scale of how I want to work, which means I gotta sketch out how big I want this little circle guy, and it should be a little bit off the bottom because some of these pages end up being cut a bit differently. Shouldn't be too large, but large enough to work with. So I guess something like here. and this will be my baseline for all of these animations. So I'll keep this guy set to a side as a reference for all of them, and will more or less be the first frame of these 26 things. It means that there's a bunch of hearts that pop up on the right side, bottom right corner. And then later I can look back and see who all liked it in my notifications. That's one of the ones that I tried trimming. I'm doing all right today. Thanks for asking. How are you doing? I think you asked that yesterday. Okay, now I need to sketch out from here how I want the A to look. So keeping the same general width. I might do this by reversing. Where instead of animating towards this, I might draw it out as a full guy. Someone asked, has anyone ever tattooed all the frames from one of your animations? No one's tattooed all the frames, but some people have tattooed individual frames. Okay. Thank you, Ilma Cat. I'm not sure. Hello, JC Carpe Art. Bienvenidos. Estados Unidos. Soy de Estados Unidos. Thanks for saying that my lives are calming and relaxing. It's nice to hear. For animations on skin and tattoos, my main concern is that a lot of animations, sort of by design, don't look great for every frame. There are often frames that are interstitial and don't function super well as a full sort of animation to it. I'm fine with animations being on skin and that sort of deal, but it's also something where the time and effort that goes into this should be a little different. Shouldn't it? I'm gonna try this again. Like presenting animations in full, it works and it doesn't work. And also something that's super easy to fake it. Like you could either just draw it on skin or you could superimpose it digitally, and that's the sort of thing where I'm like, it's an interesting concept, but the actual execution of it doesn't justify the permanence of it necessarily. And there's nothing that proves that it is a tattoo unless it's very intimate and small and you can see the texture of the skin itself in the tattooing and the photographing of the tattoo. And so, not always. It's not that I'm not a fan of it, I just, it's not always justifiable, if that makes sense. If you want to make something believable, you have to have flaws in it. Why computer-generated things tend to look so off-putting at times is because it's too perfect. I could do 0 through 9 as well. This is tentative right now to be an entire exercise. Okay, I'm going to fill this in. Or nope, not going to fill it in yet. So I think the easiest way to do this is to work backwards. So I'll get a little bit closer even on this. Nope, too much. Okay, so now I'm gonna start reversing back to this first frame because that is easier to do. Hello, D. Wilkes. What software are you using to animate it? So this is all just animated using brush and paper, and then I scan everything and use Photoshop to do an initial editing because I'm working with individual frames, so it's a bit easier to correct things. To correct the elements of those individual frames. And then I use Premiere or After Effects to then actually compile those saved out images as video files. To be more careful with the numbering for this. Keeping track of how things are moving, because this is a reversed effort. I just answered the animation question. I animate on the paper, and then from there, I put 2 on here. I did not. I'll scan all of those individual frames and use Photoshop to initially edit any issues, align things if stuff got misaligned in the process. And then save the files using After Effects or Premiere. I only paint it before making it as a digital animation. And that's why it has the aesthetic that it has. The animation is happening right here. I am currently animating. Steady enough hand. So I'm reversing the animation right now. I'm going from the final frame back to the first. So I'm accelerating this, which means in the final bit it'll be decelerating because it'll go faster to slower motion. Hello, Kay. It's been a minute. Hope your shirts are doing well. And you are as well. Your shirts and you. Thank you, J-Lo's. I'm doing alright. I got these glasses on a whim, because you can buy relatively cheap glasses online. Really, I should go to the eye doctor, and get a new prescription and just have stuff generally checked out, because it's been like 2 years, but I am apprehensive about going to the eye doctor right now because of increasing numbers of COVID. And my prescription isn't so strong, and things haven't been affecting me to a degree where I feel like I need to get new glasses. This is just a regular brand. I know how to apply the ink in a way that's not super heavy and dries usually fast enough for what I'm doing. This is Sumi ink, S-U-M-I, and the brand is Yasutomo. I don't know how to spell offhand. Yasutomo. If you are using it with the intent of doing watercolor or painting on top of it, test it first. I think it says that it's like waterproof, but I've had some mixed results if I'm remembering correctly, but I also don't really use it for watercolor because I stay one color. Thanks, Copel. I'm not sure what your name is, but hello in France. Bonjour. I can go on my bit about how I think to have an authentic accent in any language, you just have to be lazy about pronunciation. Just be like, bonjour, bonjour. Because most people aren't trying to talk super clear when they're talking just as they exist. Let's grab some of this stuff. Let's see where I'm trying to land. Hello is like one of the few things I know in French. I know how to say thank you. Hello. 1, 2, 3. And that's about where I max out. Oh, and cheese omelet. Because of an episode of Dexter's Laboratory. Okay, making sure it was recording. Omelette du fromage. Oh, so I guess I know how to say omelette and cheese. Fromage. I've talked about it before, but there's an episode of Dexter's Lab where he has a French test and he's like, I don't have time to learn French. I gotta work on all these other things. And so he works on a bunch of stuff, and then right before bed, he puts on a machine that teaches him how to speak French. And it starts with, it's a like machine that has a bunch of different stuff, but it's run off of a record player, and the record player's going through, and it's like speaking French, and it's like start of the day, what do you have for breakfast? I had a cheese omelette. Or cheese omelette. And then it says, omelette du fromage. And then the record, it's a broken record. And so there's the groove is messed up. And so it starts just repeating omelette du fromage, omelette du fromage. And when he wakes up, it's all that he can say. The machine has taught him French, but it's removed any other language from his mind. I've been working. I'm not. Are you trying to ask how long each animation takes, or how long I've been working on animations, or how much I work each day animating? I'm not super sure what specifically you're asking. The animations vary wildly in how long they take, because they're all very different. Usually takes a few hours for a couple seconds, but it depends a lot on the complexity. I try to at least draw every day, but sometimes I have other things that I have to do. I've been relatively consistent with animating past 2 odd months. But last week I had some stuff each day. How much I'm animating, it's usually the live streams, unless I have additional work that I have to do, which crops up here and there. Omelette du fromage. Getting closer. I need to take out some of these interstitial guys. Hello, Artemaniamus. There's a delay between when you post a thing in chat and when I see it, and then a delay again when I'm responding to it. Just so you know. I've learned to gauge, but I'm also doing a lot of sort of abstracted work, and so the precision of the movement isn't as necessary. If it's related to sound or timed out to something, then I might, because I've never learned like a traditional way to time that sort of thing out, I might work digitally to get the like general timing of stuff. Okay. Sorry, that's just me making sure that, there's the delay just because you were saying hello a couple times and sometimes you're a little bit seem like you think I'm missing your saying hello. Just wanted to explain why I don't say it immediately if you weren't aware. Okay, why don't you animate directly on Photoshop instead of animating like this and processing it digitally? Any reason for that? I'm more comfortable with the brush and ink. I much prefer the final product. It has, I can update it later on. Like when I started, I was doing a lot of animated GIFs. And so I was scanning things at a pretty low resolution because I could, and I didn't need to scan it at a higher resolution. But since then, I've had some people approach and ask about reusing or repurposing or licensing out animations that I've done in the past. And they might need it at a higher resolution or a different format. And that's much easier to just rescan and do that than it would be to recreate. So that's an advantageous thing. It also has a greater sense of connection between the viewer and the piece. This is 0, 1. Now I get to number all these. 2, 3, where the simpler and more direct the artwork is, the more attainable and visceral the relationship is. At least that's how I feel. I don't like using software to work as much, or having something where the tools are the element that are driving the work. Because when there are things like cutting edge technology being used in art, it's advantageous, it's good, it makes sense, it helps to make those things plausible, accessible, and move forward with what can and is done with artwork and technology in general. But a lot of the time when I see those things, they get dated very quickly, and the actual artist gets lost sometimes in those situations where the tool is dictating so much of what the piece is. And the look and feel of it, that it loses some of the artistic elements. And so I like working using sort of the most basic elements, where there's nothing about the tools being used here that are particularly unachievable, that most people have access to some sort of marking tool and paper. Maybe not these specific tools in a specific paper, but it ultimately is black and white ink drawing. So it has a storied history, and it exists across the world, and it's not access that limits the person or dictates the aesthetic, and the relationship isn't as much with the technology associated with it. And this sort of work ultimately can look like it's evergreen a lot of the time. Some of it isn't. Some of the work that I do is more has a stronger relationship to the time in which it's produced, especially file format sort of things or any sort of glitch work that I'm doing. But this work isn't as connected to the technology, if that makes sense. And because it's so simplified, there's a lot of things that as I've gotten a little bit older, I realize how quickly things age, and things that you excuse or don't notice in regards to technology and its shortcomings become defining elements as time passes on. So things like special effects from the mid-90s that I first saw and I was amazed by, and I was like, I can't believe this isn't real. How are they doing this? This is unbelievable. Even stuff from early 2000s, stuff like Lord of the Rings, where it was this technical achievement that it was like, how did they even do this? But now I look back and I'm like, here's exactly how they did it. Here's the shortcomings, except in the case of practical effects, things that are like actually created, those maintain a different sense of connection to the viewer, and because they existed. And that goes back to the idea of like imperfect things are much more realistic. They look much more real the more imperfect things are. Hello, Artie Hughes, and hello, Ariana. There's, I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with the Turing test. Alan Turing was a computer scientist and developer, creator, known as like the father of the modern computer. Or is a computer in general? It's a digital thing. But the Turing test is his idea of having a machine that is human enough in its actions to where it fools the person. Hello, Interstellic. It makes it so the person interacting with the machine doesn't know that it's a machine. And I had the realization at some point that a way to make a machine believable as a human is to make it more petty, or have it just like ignore you for no reason, to like not be perfect in its responses or immediate. Because I'm much more likely to believe that something communicating with me is human if it has failures, if it has mistakes. And so when you see computer generated artwork that's attempting to fool you into thinking that it's real, or at least suspend your disbelief enough to where you aren't concerned or distracted by those visuals, the best way to do it is to have all of these chaotic elements, these little tiny mistakes that make things look more real. Okay, yeah. And I stand by that as an idea. Things are more real the more chaotic they are. Oh, lo siento para hablar solo en inglés. No sé how to hablar con más ideas. Solo puedo hablar un pequeño de español. What will be your next step after completing this? I'll scan it. Gracias. Gracias. I had this one. No, this is one that I printed myself. I printed this one. I was gonna be like, this is one that I had in my shop for a minute, but it is not. This one that I made or prepped a screen and printed it myself, which I can tell because it's a little bit darker and there are also mistakes in the print. Thanks, Amelie. Amelie. This screen print is because there was some stuff caught in the... I don't know if you can... Let's see if... it's hard to see. This feels awkward. Right there. There's some white spots because there was some stuff caught in the screen. I was drawing stuff with the zero brush. Thank you. I'm gonna say Amelie. 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 Okay. Bonjour. Seem to get the ink sometimes sticks a little bit, but it's a thin line, and I can see. You can't see it from this camera, but the lights that's shining on it, I'm at an angle where I can see where it's still wet, and I can make a judgment call as to whether or not it's okay to put the next frame down. But sometimes they do stick regardless. Hopefully you're not saying anything bad. I can't read French. Sumi ink. Yasutomo Sumi ink. It's Japanese. I don't know how to say you're welcome in French. Okay. Deron. Derin. Deri. I'll say it. How about English? Derian. Real. Close enough. Alright. Does it translate to English the same? Is it also like direct translation would be my pronunciation or the pronunciation of Donata and Ballroom? Daryl. I make art full time. It ebbs and flows a bit. Is rien, rien, real, real? Does it mean nothing? Well, you're welcome. Like, Donata is of nothing. Saying, like, it was nothing. And I was curious if that was the same for Darien, Daryl. Okay. Thank you, Sajal Gupta. And I appreciate you taking the time to go to YouTube and look at stuff there. I know that's another step out of the way. The stuff on YouTube is the same feed as what you're getting here. I'd prefer a brush. You get more line variance naturally. When I use a pen, it tends to look too rigid for my tastes. And I can use a different selection of ink. It's a little bit more broad what ink you can use with a brush versus what you can use with a pen. Those are the main reasons. It's also much easier to fill in solids. Ink for pens tends to be a little bit more expensive as well. Where if I were to get enough ink to fill a technical pen as this, it would probably be like $50. Because this costs usually about the same as something like this. And this is 6 ounces versus 3/4 ounce. So what is that? I'm just gonna do some quick math here to see what the actual, what's 6 divided by 0.75. Yeah. 3/4 divided by 6/1. Cross multiply, right? That's 3. Maybe I'm doing this wrong. I haven't done this sort of math in a while. 4 times 6 is 24. 8 times as much for about the same price. Do I by chance use graphic pens? Sometimes I use. Oh, you got another French person in the mix. Bonjour. I use repeatograph pens. This is the one that I use most often. This was a gift from my mom. She got me into repeatograph pens. This is a Koh-i-Noor repeatograph pen. And that's why I have this repeatograph ink. The repeatograph ink can be better for use on different surfaces. It's a little bit more resilient, but it's not nearly as dark. Alcohol? I'm not sure what you're referencing there. I will clean them sometimes using rubbing alcohol. The animation is spelling out an A. I'm planning on doing the alphabet, not today, but as time goes on, trying to do like a letter a day and eventually creating something of a font. It takes up time. This sort of animation takes a few hours. I don't have a specific time because they vary a lot. I can tell you how long an animation takes. Once it's done, or if there's a little bit more detail, but I work some digitally, but I prefer to work analog, and I think it's a more interesting and unique approach. Has a greater sense of longevity and identity. How long have I been working? I've been working for about an hour 15. This will probably take another 30 minutes to animate the outlines. Hello, Budge. Zik. Budge. Zik. I think that's how you said to pronounce it. I'm getting on the tail end of the outlining section. Almost done there. But then I have to go back and fill things in. And that takes almost always longer than I think it will. It depends on the animation as to how I'm treating it. Left in there. Some things are purely as I'm going along. This one I have a concept and I did a loose sketch of what more as a way to illustrate what the thought was. Goes up, comes around, then lands, squashes out, then pops back together and moves over here and lands there. But I have that in my head. The main thing here was figuring out how I wanted the A to be formed, where I wanted it to turn and such, and I switched it a little bit from that quick sketch. But in general, I have a decent sense of how stuff's gonna go. Let me jump back here. I need to eventually make this return to its starting point. And this is an important moment because I get to sort of start this out in its trajectory. Thanks, Lou Aloha. This is just about 2 seconds of animation that we're going to. Thank you. Or hello, Martin, or Martina. Oh, we disconnected. How are we doing? Okay. And thank you, Gav Koal and Cameron. I typically work at 15 FPS. This is the same board, it's just cropped off. And depending on your phone, you might have it cropped. It's the same board. It's not an intentional cropping out. I think that's it. Give it one more frame that's just this guy, so it's settled for a sec. Okay, now this might actually look better without that extra frame. Okay. Now set these to the side. And these guys are ready. Zoom out a bit. That's the base. This I need to keep around. I'm filling in the solids. So I've done the outlines of this animation. It's a lot easier to animate its outlines. And now I'm going back in and filling in the solid black areas. You saw my portrait. It's a really great video. Thank you. I'm not sure which one you're referring to, but it's a nice thing to say. This brush is not holding in the way that I want it to. This flat brush is a 1/4 inch shader, angular shader. I don't think that these have a number. I'll look again at the side of it, but yeah, this one doesn't have, it's just a 1/4 inch. It's actually, I forget, I think that you are in India. The brush is made in India. But this has an angle to it. It's hard to see. But it makes it so I can make a little bit more pointed of a entry. Thank you, Buzzy. Hello, Shubham Kumar. I don't know if you were laughing at me saying that the brush is made in India, but it is. Hello. Hi, Neil. Neely. Oh. Eileen. You can try with whatever flat brush you have. I just like having that angle because I can get into smaller spaces more easily. I had an ongoing animation for a bit of time. Someone asked what the longest animation I've made is, and that was like 2 minutes long. And I've made some stuff that functions in a sort of modular way that is longer, but it's not unique animation, the entirety of it. If you look up, let me get this brush out of my mouth so I can say it more clearly. I made a sort of music video for Shigeto. If you look up TraceLoops Shigeto Pulse, it should pop up on YouTube. But it's a compilation of loops that I timed out to the music. And so that is about 7 minutes of video, but it's not 7 minutes of unique animation. It's only about 30 seconds of unique animation, if that. I think it actually might be closer to 20. But then the animation is reversed at times and sort of set to the music. There's a lot of, Shigeto is Shigeto. And then Pulse is the name, Pulse. And then there's like just a instrumental single image version of it that's on YouTube, but then there's also one that has my animation tied to it, and it's so if you add add trace loops to that search, then it should pop up. That's Shigeto, Shigeto, Pulse, Pulse. And if you search that, but also put trace loops in the search, then it'll pop up. If you just search the other one, it'll probably pop up like the second one down or something. That's the longest that I've had an animation set to something where it is somewhat linear. If you have trouble finding it, you can DM me or something, and I can try to help you with that. Thanks, Lucas, for the thumbs up. The 2-minute animation I did on and off for a while. It's hard to judge the amount of time that it takes for those sorts of things because I do it in pieces. That one I would like try to do 100 frames in a day, but it was pretty abstracted. And it was not particularly planned out. The idea for me was like sketchy animation with dry brush. But I worked on it on and off. It was something I could return to, just like add some frames to this if I didn't know what I wanted to do. I have no idea how long it took. It took a while. have a favorite drawing. Favorite animation. I have ones that I prefer, or ideas that I like. But it changes with time. A lot of the time when I hear people talk about like what's their favorite thing, a lot of the time it's the most recent thing that they created. And it varies for me. Sometimes it's the most recent one because it's the freshest and it's the one that expresses newer ideas or concepts. And it's a mix for me. Sometimes I like looking at things that I made a while ago that I thought weren't great at the time. But then I come back and I'm like, oh, that was a much more interesting idea. I'd like to revisit that. And sometimes something that I really enjoyed at the time, I think that wasn't that great. The time that I invested in that was sort of misguided. It's usually if it's something that I wasn't doing as much for my own interest or exploration. Those are the things I tend to dislike. Where it's more likely something that I made because I was trying to clout chase in some way. Even though that's a more recent sort of, it's not the most recent, but it's a more recent terminology where I was trying to make things to receive interaction rather than make something that I enjoyed as much. Those tend to be the things that I dislike when I revisit them. Things that are heavily referencing something that's not my creation. Those aren't my favorite, but it is a very good entry point. Recently, I guess it was yesterday, maybe the day before, someone commented on one of my YouTube uploads. They were like, hey, I'm an animator too, but a noob. And I went and looked at their videos, and it was a lot of stick figure stuff. And I told them, like, I did a lot of stick figure stuff when I was starting out. And they were like, let me see it, which was bold in a way that I don't have that sort of confidence. But I was like, okay, because I also want to be encouraging in those situations. And so I went to my Photo Bucket account, which I used in the mid-aughts. The oldest photos I have on there are from like 2015, or no, 2005. So about 15 years ago. And it's a lot of stuff where I'm like, this is very cliche throughout the entirety of it. And like, this wasn't as good as I remember thinking it was. A lot of edits of people's photos, because there was a different accessibility with MySpace. Like, I can just take that person's photo and edit it and then sort of gift it to them, or like show all my ability without using my own. Maybe that's why I'm less inclined to use other people's photos, because I did it too much when I was younger. But found that old animation. It's just a stick figure, and it kicks the head off of another stick figure, and then that head hits its head, and they both die. It was a lot of like ironic death sort of deals in my stick figure animations. Oh, I forget. Oh, yeah, so it's interesting looking back to those older things and being like, oh, this stuff that I was making for other people, I don't like it as much as these weird ideas that I just sort of was perhaps a little bit more, not embarrassed, but apprehensive about sharing. More concerned about how they'd be perceived because they were more personal. Those were the ones that I still like. Where it's like, oh, I can see where I built things from that. So as far as like favorite drawings, it tends to be ones where I might have been taking more of a risk for myself or been more vulnerable. It's crazy what things I thought were vulnerable and what things I think are vulnerable now, because it changes as you get older as to like what you're more willing to share and be open about. What inspires me for weird ideas? A lot of the time it's seeing something and wanting to do a version of it. And then figuring out what of those things that I liked or appreciated. And sort of learning and growing. So when I say like, that's like, what inspires you? It's like seeing things and wanting to learn. It's very nice of you to say Giacomo. I'm not sure. Sorry for whatever I'm saying, and if it's not your name at all. How did I develop my art style? Focusing in on stuff that I liked and having a sense of recognizing elements of it. I don't know if that's the best way to explain it. I still do work that exists outside of it, but there is a sense of branding. Looking at graphic design, looking at other artists, seeing things that are like immediately recognizable. Some of it's just that it's comfortable. I've spent enough time to where I know what sort of falls within the realm of TraceLoops. It's experimenting, learning, seeing what works, what doesn't work. Which is pretty broad. Sketching, revisiting things, and developing them further. That sort of goes back on the idea of like going back and seeing what I did and being like, oh, that was where this started. A lot of getting comfort in an art style is just seeing what you actually like and giving yourself permission to focus in on it. Thank you, Nath Padat. I feel like I'm very likely to not be saying that correctly. don't have a snake. I do remember, like, the first time. I could see having an interest in snakes for this. Like, the first time touching a snake, I think it was at Charlestown Landing. That's in Charleston, South Carolina. And they got, like, some nature things, and a lot of school trips ended up there because they had a big field. Oh, so you are. Natalie French Fry. But the first time touching a snake and having a weird reaction because you like think that it's gonna be possibly like slimier or smoother, and it's not at all the texture you anticipate it'll be because it's neither like slimy nor smooth nor textured. But I do not own a snake, and it's unlikely that I will at any point. But I don't speak French. Not sure if that question was meant for me. Hello, Rosa. This filling section, or this process of filling in, will speed up in a minute. Hello. Excuse me. Don't have any projects to talk about at this moment in time. It's just me trying to go through the alpha a bit. Thank you, Wiebke. It's encouraging of you to type. I'll try to remember to look at your animation. Welcome back. If you tag me or send me a message, it's a lot easier for me to find that video. Because there's a good chance I'm going to forget specifically what your username is. And then I can't search so easily. Thank you, Laureline. Getting closer. Inspiration to do these. I started off doing more rotoscoping, And then I wanted to have a little bit more ownership of the work. So I moved away from as much rotoscoping and tried doing a bit more frame by frame original animation. I don't know if there's a specific inspiration, but it's a lot of wanting to understand how motion exists and is perceived. And going from there. And some love for your animation. Just nice and supportive. Which I'm glad. I feel weird being the focus of that. You should just enjoy having people celebrate your thing, which I guess is what you're doing, but you're doing for me. Getting closer to being done. Do you decide on the final movements? Sorry, that wasn't me mocking, I just was reading it. I'm not sure what you're asking. I decide the movement. It's a little bit varied. I usually have some idea of what I want to do. Sometimes I figure it out as I'm working. Sometimes I sketch out some general ideas, or if I know that I'm moving towards... So in the case of this one, I was moving towards a more complex and specific figure because I had the A. And so I knew that I wanted it to go to form the A. So I drew out the A as an outline, and then I worked backwards from that, which is probably how I'm going to have to do most of these, just because it's a little bit more complex of something to be drawing than just a loose form that has no outside reference. But it depends on the animation. A lot of the time I have at least the idea of what movement I want to happen, but sometimes I don't. but it's not as planned out as most professional animation would be. Getting so close to being done. It's almost like just the right amount of ink, which I rarely do. Usually I way overestimate just because I'm like pouring it out. When I didn't want to spend as much on ink, I would be a lot more inclined to save the ink after I finish working, using a syringe with a blunt tip, with a blunt needle, and I would just suck it up and put it back in. That meant that it lasted longer, but it also meant that I dirtied up an additional tool. Say her name is in reference to Breonna Taylor, a woman in Louisville, Kentucky, who was shot and killed by police. In her home while the police were enacting a no-knock warrant. Most of the witnesses in the trial were on record as saying that the police did not announce themselves, which means that they shot into the house, or broke into the house without announcement, and her boyfriend, thinking that they were intruders, fired at police after it's contested, but fired. They exchanged fire, different accounts as to who fired first, and they shot and killed Breonna Taylor. Not terribly difficult to start a t-shirt brand. I didn't make t-shirts all at once. It's a lot easier than it would have been in the past with direct-to-garment printing and fulfillment services that print on demand, and so there's a number of sites that have a little bit higher of a cost, but there's no subscription fee, and there's not any sort of minimum order for anything. So you can design things. You do have to have, for those sites, enough upstart money to pay for the shirts when they're ordered, which at different points in my life I would not have had. And I would have been much more comfortable purchasing the shirts and knowing exactly how many I had to sell. I'm using Printful, but there's also a number of other ones. If you search like direct-to-garment printing services or just various print services, there's Printful, Printify, something that starts with a G that I always forget. And they can print on various surfaces. And it's varying quality depending on what you're looking to print and how you're printing. Okay, I'll try to remember to check. The main thing is whether or not if it shows up in my notifications. Sometimes those things get buried. If you DM me, just send it to me. That's the easiest way for me to find it if I have whatever, but I'll try to remember your username and to look for it. I appreciate you taking the time to tell me about it. It's nice to see different work that people are producing. I'm curious to see how people respond to the work that I'm making. This is getting a little... Okay. I don't know if it's happening for everyone, but it won't be if you watch it later on YouTube, and it won't be for the time lapse, but I've been having more stuttery sort of bits of the live feed, and I'm not listening to it. I'm just watching it because I mute it, because otherwise I'll get feedback or just a delayed audio, because my phone will output it and it'll get picked up by the mic, and I don't want to wear headphones. Okay, making sure that, but sometimes it's just my phone, the connections. Sounding good? Nice. I'm using the Blue Snowball mic that you gave me for our podcast. I do have that, like, I can do a more complex setup for the mic that sounds worse, because this one's good for just general omnidirectional, right? The mic, as opposed to the one of, well, I have a mic that works better if I'm just trying to pick up one thing, but I have to be like right up on it to get a good, I have to, eat the mic. I was also checking the levels, because in the past I've had the my phone connected to data as I'm streaming stuff, and I think the signal gets picked up because it's right next to the microphone. And so I was just looking to see if I had like a low level hum on the levels, but I think the only sort of low level hum you can hear is the fan of my computer. I was just thinking about the fact that I'm glad that I got more into consistent live streaming after summertime, because usually I have a window unit and that would just be a constant humming sound. Maybe not 100% constant, but pretty constant, coming and going. And it's the sort of thing that I tune out, but it's not fun to listen to through a device. What's the other thing? I got the... Didn't really require replacement, but I got a new battery for the Game Boy Micro, and I'm letting it charge for a bit to see how it goes. I thought that it was going to be a more complex install, but Game Boy Micros are super easy to replace. I didn't even need a Y-tip screwdriver, even though I bought one in anticipation, which now I can use to open up my Wii, because I lost the power cord for that at some point. There's a disc in there. Hola, fun compass. But replacing the battery on the Game Boy Micro, very easy. You just need a Phillips head screwdriver, and it's a clip-in. There's no soldering involved, which I was not expecting. I was expecting it to be like buried in there, because it's pretty small. It's something that like you can easily break the board or a connection or something. Thank you, Sunflower Gabby. That's nice. But yeah, just pull out the old battery, put a new one in there, and I'll see if that makes the battery life well using the flash card, the Easy Flash, so it lasts longer or not. It should make it last at least a little bit longer, but I don't know how much the emulation little card thing really kills the battery or not. Ooh. Forgot these were open. Maybe I shouldn't eat them because Doritos aren't good for handling art. So now let's get to scanning. After I put these up here for the later dates, I'm almost forgetting that consistently. Oh, sorry, didn't mean to exclude you. Okay, mañanas. It's not my intention. Thank you as well. Let me just put this together and then I'll talk about the setup. Actually, I'm gonna redo this in just a sec. Let's get one further out and get that better. Okay. This is for a time lapse. When a time lapse comes into play. When I started these, I did not consider how much this board would increase the sound. It's acting as something of an amplifier or a drum. Okay, so the setup is using OBS to create a stream that then is pushed through Yellow Duck, which can push things out to Instagram Live. That's like the only thing that's really used for. And so I have this camera above, it's up here, and then I have a camera there, which is facing me. It's a lower quality camera or lower resolution. That doesn't deal as well with low light situations and has a little bit cooler of a color profile, and anytime I try to correct it, it gets a little bit off, so I just leave it. And yeah, and then I have a blue snowball microphone, and that's connected to my computer, which is running OBS, and so that's how I'm able to combine things. So now we are going to start scanning. Show this guy, pull this up, and hopefully no issues. Seems to be working. Let's get this to a different location. Live designs 18, new folder 11-18-2020 underscore alphabet A. Create, choose that guy. 11-18 alphabet A. 600, okay. Making sure it wasn't. I've got a decent organization happening. I just do it by the day and the general name. I don't have the best file organization for when I'm working, just generally, but because of the amount of work day by day that I've been doing with this, I've got some sort of format in place, standardization. I try to draw on the daily. I've been doing so pretty consistently for a few months now, as far as producing for live streams. I did draw daily for a while here and there. Sometimes I have larger projects, and so that becomes the drawing every day sort of deal. And I am more likely to get burned out doing those sorts of projects, and so I'll take a break. And so sometimes I don't draw every day, but most of the time I'm doing something along those lines. Hello, Reno. Do some good engineering today. Thank you, Irene. That's a nice thing to say. I appreciate it. That's also a nice thing to say. Glad to hear you did some good engineering. Or programming. It's good to be working. Making money and paying bills. I'm not 100% sure how smooth this squashing section is going to look, but we'll find out. I will find out. I'll find out. We'll find out. Almost done. Nice. Let me write down your username. That's the best way to do it. Yep. Okay, set that over there. Should be able to remember to check out your video. Hope you have a good night. Today it is 35 frames. 34, 35. 35. Though when I see it animated, I might eliminate the last frame. I have to see how it looks. Because I have it settling, but it might be better to just have it jumping back to the motion. Sorry you couldn't connect earlier. Is that on your end or my end? Did it say, like, unable to connect to the stream? Because I've been having a little bit of some issues with broadcast stuff today, where it's cut in and out a little bit here and there. So hopefully that's not on my end, but if it is, I might have to decrease the bit rate. I think it might be just my computer or something. You get to see the animation without hanging out for 3 hours. The plan for this one is to do the alphabet. So today it's A. Okay. I have been having more instances where stuff pauses or freezes for a moment. Not a terrible drop. Okay. Glad the frame looks, or the stream looks good. Okay, so now let's pull up Photoshop. Start loading files into this stack here. No, gotta grab those. Rename these. This is 18 alphabet A. Number starts at 1. Rename these guys. Oop. Rename those files. Okay, yeah, it should be that number. Copy these over and add 5 zeros here. And now go by name, pull these in, and hit OK, and start doing a display capture. And now you can watch these guys load up. Sorry about the time difference. I will post the final result. I'm almost there, but if you need to go to bed or head out, feel free to do that. Don't let me keep you. But we're like maybe 5 minutes away from seeing the animation. In this animation, frames from layers, 1, first frames, get a general sense of space. Let me try getting rid of that last frame. I think it works a little bit better without that last frame.
Okay, let me get a sense of how far over everything goes. EA. Barely over here. Height wise, it's about here. Okay. I'm gonna make this a little bit wider. Let's crop it down. Right about EA. Just so it stays central when it's drawn. Okay, so now let's make this 1080. And make these guys a little bit faster. Curves, make these a little bit darker. Zoom in a little. Well, for this, I gotta blow it out a little. Save this. One higher out. And I'll rename that in a second. Use GIF and show this image. And second to browse, desktop, live designs, 1018, tone.gif. And there you go. So there's the start of doing alphabet stuff. It's an A, and it only took 3 hours for a letter. This is gonna be over 100, no, not over 100. It'll be like 70 hours of work. It is gummy. I can play with it a little bit. Different letters might be stretchy or less stretchy, more rigid or not. This one is 34 frames. I drew 35, but I decided to eliminate the last one so that when it goes back into it, it has less of a delay. One thing about it, right, the date, 11 slash, there's a little bug flying around, 18/20. Thirty-four frames. I'll make a t-shirt of this design as I do. It's 34 unlucky. Four is unlucky, isn't it? but 8 is very lucky, or is that Chinese? Anyway, any other questions, thoughts, concerns, comments? Hello in Chile. I'm going to take this opportunity to eat some Doritos. Wonderful art. Me eating Doritos. Hola in Peru. Some exposition. First I gotta answer the other ones. How long does it take to make an animation? This one took about 3 hours, but it really depends. This one's a little bit shorter than some of the other ones I've done recently. It's also a little bit more planned out. And what is it? Can you make a master? No, it's frozen. Okay. Can you make a master class about it? I can work, but it's a lot of work to make a class to convey things. I don't have exposition that I'm aware of. I'm not sure what you're talking about. I have a TikTok, I have a website, I have a Tumblr, I have an Instagram, I have a Twitter. Come on, this bug keeps flying around. I don't know what Ostalung is. Okay. That's enough Doritos for right now. Thank you. Doritos are really bad to eat while working on stuff, because there's no way not to get it on the stuff that you're working on. But I finished handling everything, so I felt better to eat some snack. Okay. If you have any questions, throw them down. I'm just gonna, while putting that out there, run through. I'm here on Instagram. I have a YouTube. If you want to see this live stream again or cut back and forth or look at previous live streams, if you just search TraceLoops, I don't think there's much competition coming up for stuff being displayed there. I'm going to get through my spiel and then answer the question, Reno. If you want to buy shirts, you can go to traceloops.com/store. You can also just look at traceloops.com. If you're on TikTok and the like, TraceLoops there as well. It's a lot of the same stuff coming through, if not pretty much the same. It just might be different song choices because of what's available on the platforms. And yeah, if you have questions, you can throw them out, which I'll be answering in just a second in this live stream. There's a little bug flying around. You can also email me at traceloops@traceloops.com. If you are not based in the US and want to buy a t-shirt, you can direct message me, comment on some stuff or something, try and get my attention. But the best way is to email me at that same address, traceloops@traceloops.com. And then Reno asked, have I tried sculpture? I've done some sculpture here and there. I don't have the tools or kind of the patience, but it's mostly like I don't have the tools and the materials necessary to create sculpture that I think looks good. I've tried making some like basic molds. Bug is annoying. I've got so much lights around. Made some basic molds and trying to do some plaster casts that look okay but aren't the best. I just haven't invested the time, effort, or money into really learning how best to do sculpture. I did some welding in college for a metal sculpture class, but at that time didn't have really any money or a car, which isn't good for heavy sculptures. Michael, thank you for being cool with taking the second shirt. And hopefully that gets to you soon if it's not already to you. I think that you're close by, so it might have gone faster, but that was 2 days ago. Maybe. Sometimes stuff goes super fast. I have done some stop motion. The question was, have you done stop motion? Done a little bit in the past, but not anything particularly polished. When I was younger, I did some what I've since learned are called brick films, because Legos are very good for introduction to stop motion because it's functioning on a grid and it's easy to reposition the figures because they have little holes in their feet that sink onto the platform, and it's a much easier way to be introduced to something, and you don't have to buy a bunch of equipment as far as positioning or holding or getting like modeling clay, stuff like that. And it's a little bit easier to be introduced into it. Some like loose things of figures doing stuff. Where are my animation studios? They're close by to where I am. Do you need a drawer to help you in your firma? I have boxes and such. I manage what I have. Come on. Come on. It keeps coming back and it's annoying me. Do you have any animators you admire historically? I'm a big fan of Norman McLaren. That's Norman. Norman. I'm pretty sure I spelled that right. Norman McLaren. McLaren. Norman McLaren. He was a Scottish-born animator, but worked primarily in Canada for the National Film Board of Canada. He started off not having money to expose and develop film, so he just drew on blank film, and he also didn't have money to record a soundtrack, so he did optical soundtrack. So in film, depending on the production, you'll have next to the exposed frames, you'll have a small audio track that's printed and then read because there are issues with syncing up audio for film if it's playing a little fast or a little slow, and you had a record or something like that and it was playing a little fast, a little slow. Stuff would get out of sync, which happened in earlier film when sound was introduced. It's also why film had to switch back to being a real-time playback, because for a while in silent films things were more exaggerated and motions were big and the playback speed was faster than what it was recorded in, but with sound it had to be synced up. So in stuff like The Jazz Singer, the first big talkie, you would have playback for the silent areas where motions would be really fast and cartoonish, and then once it got to the parts where they were singing or had sound synced up with it, it would
slowed down significantly. But Norman McLaren, he drew the optical track on the side, and that's a really interesting thing to me, to have that connection, the visual representation and actuality of the sound being the relationship between those things. So I really like Norman McLaren. Bill Plimpton is a cool animator dude. A lot of people I forget offhand, and then I have friends or contemporary folks that work in a similar sort of space. People that I've done more collaborative work with, and just good friends, Zolek and Sam Cannon, Toka Mayer, Julian Glander, what's his name? Jerome Lamar, is that his name? I forget. I really like Lola Dupree is that one. What's Eleanor Kopka? She does simple but emotionally complex and vulnerable short animations that are sometimes explicit, but they're simplified, and so it's a weird mashup of that. So I like all those animators. Okay, you said to make an animation studio like Walt Disney. Walt Disney wasn't really an animator, or too much of a cartoonist. He was much more a businessman, and I forget the name of something works, like iBworks. He did a lot of the animation and design work initially. That sounds terrifying, to have a studio and have those responsibilities. Do you have a Trace animation studio? I just have personal things. Expand, conquer the world. I think you're so smart. That's very nice, Gabby. Bugs back. Awesome. I'll be writing these names down and I'll look them up. Thank you. Create a studio. Do I have a P.O. box where you can send me stuff? I do have a P.O. box. Most of the purpose I have for it is that when I send people things that I can write not my home address on, but my P.O. box is, I'll write it down so you can look at it and see it there. And slide it below here. It's, what is it? 899 Bergen Ave, number 16598, Jersey City, New Jersey, 07306. Will that fit? Not quite. You can send me something. It feels weird just receiving something, just because I have weird things with gifts and giving, where I like giving gifts more than I like receiving them, because I feel a weird feeling about it. Hopefully, or let me do this above. Slide this down. Does that fit? There, can you see that now? And those are 2 9s. 8, 9. Let me connect that. And that's 16598. I don't check it super frequently. I check it when I stop by the post office, but I do my best to generally avoid going to places where there's a lot of influx of folks right now. But I will stop by if I'm dropping things off to send out. or if, yeah, that's the main reason. That's the only real reason that I go to the post office nowadays. So if you send something and you want me to pick it up and you know that it's arrived, this is my P.O. box. This is not my address. But you can send things here and I can pick them up. But if you have sent something and I haven't responded or done anything to interact with you about it, there's a solid chance that I just haven't been to the post office. But I don't check it super frequently because I generally don't get much stuff to that, to my P.O. box. And the P.O. box that I have is the smallest one that they have available, so anything larger than about yay big in primary directions won't fit in it, and they'll put a little note in there and I get to go wait in line and pick it up. But yeah, so any other questions, thoughts, concerns? If not, I'm gonna slide this away because it feels oddly vulnerable. And I'll post stuff up. You can watch the A indefinitely. Once I post it up. Okay. So again, this video and such, if you want to watch it in full, you can go to YouTube. It'll be up in 30 to 40 minutes probably, in standard definition, and then HD, it takes a couple hours sometimes, because these are long videos. I'll post this as a time lapse, and you can watch it here on Instagram. You can also watch it over on TikTok if you want to go over yonder and be with younger folks that are younger than me. And then, so YouTube, search TraceLoops. I'm here on Instagram. You want to buy a shirt and you're in the US, head to traceloops.com/store. You want to see what inventory I have and you live outside the US, you can go there and then you can message me. Most shirts cost about $5 more for shipping, to where I've shipped things thus far with a little bit of taxes on top of stuff. And so shirts start off at about $28 if it's international, outside of the US. Yeah, if you have questions, thoughts, concerns, send me messages. If you do want to get one of those shirts, you can DM me, but I'm more likely to respond sooner or see it if you email me, which is traceloops@traceloops.com. Thank you all for watching. Plan on being back tomorrow and starting into the B of the alphabet, the second letter. All right, thanks. I'm going to head out, and bye-bye.